Once upon a time, in a village nestled between rolling hills and a wide, deep river, there lived a young man named Kojo. He was known throughout the land for his incredible drumming skills. His music could make the trees sway and the animals dance. His rhythms stirred the hearts of men, bringing laughter and tears. It was said that the spirits of his ancestors walked among the listeners, moving to the beat of his drum. But Kojo was never satisfied with just being good. Every night he would sit by the river, pouring out his heart and soul into his music, asking the spirits within it to teach him the secrets of even greater drums. But the spirits only whispered riddles in the wind, leaving him more confused than ever. One night, frustrated and tired, he decided to take his worries to the river itself. Maybe the river, with all its ancient wisdom, could help him. So with his drum clutched tightly in his hand, Kojo raced out of his hut and began to run towards the river, splashing through the tall grass and leaping over fallen logs. When he reached the riverbank, he was filled with determination. "River," he called out, "I have played for kings, for chiefs, for strangers across the land. But still, it is not enough. I want to be greater than all who ever lived. Teach me the rhythm that will make me greater than all who ever lived." The river seemed to rumble with amusement. "Drummer," it said, its voice like the murmur of ages past, "you seek greatness. You wish to be greater than all who ever lived. But tell me, Kojo, what is the price of greatness? Are you willing to pay?" Kojo hesitated. His mother had always told him, "Pride blinds." Yet his own pride burned brightly, eager to seize the greatness that awaited him. "Yes," he replied, his voice echoing his determination. The river rose up then, its waves curling like the fingers of giants ready to strike. "Very well," it boomed. "Strike your drum now one final time and I will grant your wish." Kojo didn't hesitate. He raised his drum in salute to the river and beat the skin with all his might. The sound that erupted was unlike anything anyone had ever heard. It was thunder wrapped in sorrow, joy laced with fire. The villagers woke in terror and rushed to the riverbank. They saw Kojo standing there, drumming furiously, his face pale as moonlight, his eyes blazing with an otherworldly light. And then the river claimed him. One moment he was there, the next he had vanished. All that remained was the fading echo of his final drumbeat. The villagers watched in suspense as the river slowly calmed, the image of Kojo imprinted on their terrified minds. The next morning, the river was calm again, as if nothing had happened. The villagers emerged from their homes, blinking in the sunlight, the memory of the previous night's events still fresh in their minds. But as the day wore on, life returned to normal. The market bustled with activity. Children chased each other through the streets, and the old men sat on their porches telling stories of days gone by. Yet a hush fell over the village at night. The elders recounted tales of the river's capricious nature, reminding the villagers of its power and its unpredictability. They spoke of how the river had claimed many who had dared to challenge it, and how those who survived often bore the scars of their encounters etched onto their bodies and souls. As the years passed, the memory of that fateful night faded into a distant whisper. New generations grew up, unaware of the legend that lurked beneath the surface of their tranquil village life. Then one day, a traveler arrived. He carried with him tales of far-off lands and adventures beyond their wildest imaginations. He spoke of legendary drummers whose music could move mountains and part the seas. The villagers listened, enthralled, their eyes shining with wonder and longing. The traveler continued his journey, leaving behind a seed of inspiration that took root in the hearts of the villagers. Soon, a new young man named Kwame set out on his own journey to become the greatest drummer the world had ever seen. He traveled from village to village, learning different styles of drumming and perfecting his craft. With each passing year, his skill grew, and soon his name became known throughout the land. One evening, As Kwame sat by the same river where Kojo had disappeared, he heard a faint drumbeat rising from the depths. It was a mesmerizing sound that seemed to call out to him, beckoning him closer. As he leaned in, he could hear the drums better. They were powerful and haunting, stirring something deep within his soul. Despite the fear that gnawed at him, he couldn't resist the call. He stood up, his heart pounding in his chest, and began to walk towards the sound. The drumbeat grew louder, drowning out all other sounds around him. Just as he reached the spot where Kojo had disappeared, the drum stopped abruptly. Kwame hesitated, fear gripping him like a vice. He wanted to run away, but something kept him rooted to the spot. Taking a deep breath, he forced himself to look into the water. The river was calm, its surface reflecting the moonlight like a sheet of silver. But as he stared into its depths, he saw a faint glimmer. He leaned closer and gasped. At first he thought it was a coin, but as it rose to the surface, he realized it was a drum. Trembling, Kwame reached out and pulled the drum onto the bank. As he brushed the mud off its surface, he noticed an inscription. "Beware the river's call." With a sinking feeling in his stomach, he remembered the old tales of the river's wrath. He knew that this drum belonged to Kojo, the legendary drummer who had vanished into the river all those years ago. But why was it here? Did this mean that Kojo was still trapped in the river, forever bound to his music? Overwhelmed with a sudden burst of courage, Kwame sat down on the bank and began to play. His fingers flew across the drum, and as the rhythm filled the air, the river seemed to stir. Suddenly, the water began to churn, and a low growl echoed from the depths. The river was rising, and it was angry. Kwame panicked, realizing that he had unleashed something he couldn't control. He tried to stop playing, but his hands wouldn't obey. They moved on their own, driven by an unseen force. The river roared, and from its churning depths emerged a giant serpent. Its scales glistened like emeralds, and its eyes burned with an otherworldly fire. It slithered closer, its gaze fixed on Kwame and the drum in his hands. Fear threatened to consume him, but Kwame stood his ground. He knew that he had to do something to stop the river's fury. But what? In a desperate attempt to appease the creature, Kwame began to play a soothing melody. The music echoed across the water, and the serpent seemed to pause, its head raised in the air as if listening intently. The melody swelled, and for a moment the music seemed to calm the beast. And then it happened. As Kwame played, he felt a connection, a bond forming between him and the serpent. He realized that this wasn't just a wild animal, it was a spirit, a guardian of the river. The realization brought clarity. He understood now that the river wasn't just a body of water. It was alive, full of mystery and magic. With newfound determination, Kwame changed his tune. He began to play a triumphant melody, a celebration of the river's power and majesty. The music soared, and as it echoed across the water, the serpent seemed to relax, its head dipping lower. Kwame continued playing, and as the first rays of dawn touched the horizon, the serpent slithered back into the river, disappearing into its depths. The river, too, seemed to calm, its surface becoming still and serene. As the sun rose higher in the sky, washing away the darkness of the night, the villagers emerged from their homes, blinking in the morning light. They had heard the commotion, the clash of drums and the roar of the river, but they had been too afraid to come closer. Now, as the danger seemed to have passed, they gathered on the bank, whispering in hushed tones. Then they saw Kwame, standing on the riverbank, the drum at his feet. He looked up, meeting their worried gazes, and a smile touched his lips. "The river is calm now," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "I think the spirit is at peace." A collective sigh of relief swept through the crowd. They knew that the river's wrath was something to be reckoned with, and the fact that Kwame had survived was nothing short of a miracle. From that day on, Kwame became known as the river's son. He continued to travel, sharing his music with the world. but he always returned to the river, paying homage to the spirit he had encountered. And whenever a new generation grew up, he would tell them the story, reminding them of the river's power and the importance of respecting the mysteries that lay hidden beneath the surface. And so, the legend of the river lived on, passed down from one storyteller to the next, a timeless tale of bravery, respect, and the enduring power of music.